The Hole. This is a book about the sinking of the Estonia, the ferry, the Estonia, on September 28th of 1994. If you are about my age, if you're in your 40s or so, you probably might remember that. It was a pretty major disaster. The quick synopsis of events, it went something like this. It was a ferry that was leaving, I believe, leaving Estonia. I forget what, I'm not as geographically savvy with that region, but it sunk, I think, in about 300 or 400 feet of water, and it sunk quick. And it sunk so fast that I forget what the death toll is. Here we go. Here's the synopsis. So, in September 1994, the passenger ferry Estonia set out on an overnight cruise from Tallinn, Estonia to Stockholm, Sweden, and sank in the Baltic Sea, killing nearly 1,000 people in 35 minutes. It was the worst peacetime catastrophe in European waters in the 20th century. A controversial government investigation blamed the ship's design and high waves, but the Estonia went down faster than some ships with torn open hulls. A disturbing fact that was left unexplained. The victims still remain in the shipwreck in shallow depth just off the coast of Finland. Independent dive investigations of the ferry are forbidden. Official secrecy surrounds the disaster. So in this, I forget how I originally even stumbled across this, because I remember the sinking. It was big news at the time, and then it went away. But as they point out there on the back, this was especially interesting in that it sank so fast, and then independent investigation was forbidden. In fact, I think at one point they were even considering, and I think this is discussed herein, that they were discussing pouring concrete over the wreckage. And that's, again, now we're to why this is part of my library, because this book deals with the theories of how this ship might have actually sunk and why it might have actually sunk. So he puts out several theories. None of them, he doesn't say any one of them is definitive, but puts out about 3 or 4 theories as to how and why he thinks the Estonia was sunk. And it gets into some pretty crazy political intrigue of what all was happening. You had, at that time in history, you have the recent collapse of the Soviet Union and a lot of military hardware being sold off to the highest bidder, literally the highest bidder. So in that, the highest bidder included third world countries that were fighting for advanced military hardware. So one of the theories is that some third world country had bought some advanced military hardware, possibly nuclear hardware, from some of the collapsing Soviet states, and that this was being moved to Finland, being smuggled over to Finland where somebody could pick it up. And in the process, someone decided that it made more sense to sink the Estonia rather than have this contraband make it to shore. So that's one of the theories, because again, you had all these other Western countries that wanted to prevent that from happening. But it's really interesting, like you said, a lot of the bodies are still down there stuck in the wreck. They won't let anybody go into the wreckage. It's a forbidden area, even though it's in international water. You're not allowed to dive in this area. There's rumors that it might be contaminated by radioactive material. One of the other theories that he puts out that's really another fascinating theory is that a contraband, possibly nuclear sub that might have also been purchased from one of the former Soviet countries, might have run into the Estonia as it was traveling across the ocean. So there's some crazy stuff that was happening in it. He says that might be the conning tower of that smashing into the hull might have been what caused such a quick sinking. But really, one of the most compelling pieces of evidence is that it appears that the door of the ferry was actually blown off, which is what caused it to sink so fast. So thus pointing to deliberate sabotage, that someone wanted to sink that ferry and destroy whatever it was that was on that so badly they were willing to do it at the expense of 1,000 souls. So really fascinating information. This is one of those that, again, I think is an important political science history, especially where it deals with the collapsing Soviet Union and that selling off of military hardware. Just a lot of issues that, especially those of us in the West, that we don't really think about the implications of that when you have a collapsing superpower and all this military hardware that suddenly, this really advanced military hardware that suddenly goes onto the open market, and the implications of that. So anyway, fascinating read. And I'm curious if anybody else, this is one of those that's obscure enough that I haven't run into a whole lot of people who have who've seen this, but it's called The Hole, Another Look at the Sinking of the Estonia Ferry on September 28, 1994 by Drew Wilson. So definitely worth a look if you are into any of this kind of political intrigue. This is a fascinating look. And again, not a conspiracy book per se. This is more of a just here's the event that happened, and here's kind of the bigger picture of what could have influenced this event. So highly recommend it.